The wedding in Santorini was supposed to be the most perfect day of my sister Destiny's life. At least, that's what everyone online believed. But perfection has a strange way of collapsing all at once. The first sign that something had gone terribly wrong wasn't a phone call. It was 50 of them. 50 missed calls in one night. When I first saw them, I assumed my parents were celebrating. Maybe they were drunk on expensive wine, showing off Destiny's engagement ring to relatives. Maybe they just wanted to brag about how luxurious the wedding was. That's the kind of family I came from. But when I finally answered the phone later that night, I realized the celebration in Greece had already turned into something else entirely. Something my logical brain could barely process. But before all of that chaos, before the police, before the arrests, before the accusations, there was only silence. I was sitting alone in my apartment in Boston. The only sound in the room was the quiet humming of my refrigerator in the kitchen. My living room was dark, except for the pale blue glow of my phone's screen lighting up the coffee table. It was one of those peaceful nights that feel almost too quiet. Just me, the darkness, and a phone that wouldn't stop vibrating. Welcome to Turning Tables Stories. Right now, I'm sitting here with a cup of coffee, watching the world outside my window slowly wake up. But the calm moment I'm enjoying now is the complete opposite of the chaos Gabrielle was about to face that night. Before we continue, tell me something in the comments. Where are you listening from right now? And what are you drinking while you listen to this story? Coffee, tea, maybe something stronger. I'd love to know while we go back to that dark apartment in Boston, because that's where everything began. My phone vibrated again on the wooden surface of my coffee table. The screen lit up the room with a cold, almost medical blue light. 11:51 p.m. Another notification appeared. This time it wasn't a call. It was a Venmo request from my mother, Emily Harper. Amount requested, $4,500. I stared at the number for a long moment. Then I read the message she attached. Gabby, sweetie, the resort in Oya is being impossible. Their card machine is down, and they need the final deposit for the rehearsal dinner right now. Please send it on Venmo just for an hour. Your father will pay you back as soon as he moves money from his savings. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the screen. As a senior compliance officer, my entire career revolves around one thing: spotting fraud, recognizing suspicious patterns, detecting when someone is lying about money. And what I was looking at right now wasn't an emergency. It was a pattern. The broken card machine excuse, that was one of my parents' favorites. They used it last year when my brother Tyler got into legal trouble and needed immediate bail money. They used the exact same story 2 years ago when Destiny decided she absolutely needed a designer handbag that cost more than most people's monthly rent. The words were different each time. But the script never changed, and the ending was always the same. I always paid, because in my family I had quietly become something very specific, not the favorite child, not the most loved. Just the most reliable wallet. I knew the financial reality behind that wedding in Greece. My parents had already refinanced their house for the second time just to afford the flights. They had spent months pretending they were wealthier than they actually were. And like always, they expected me to be the safety net when things finally collapsed. For years, I had been funding parts of their lifestyle, not openly, not proudly, but quietly. When they fell into financial trouble, I fixed it. When they overspent, I covered the gap. When they made terrible decisions, I absorbed the consequences. I spent most of my 20s being the responsible daughter. But over time, I realized what that phrase actually meant. It meant I was the interest-free loan provider for the entire family, the one who worked late, the one who skipped vacations, the one who saved money so everyone else could spend it. I looked at the Venmo request again, $4,500, just another temporary emergency. Just another, we'll pay you back soon. But something inside me felt different that night. Usually when my parents asked for money, I felt guilt immediately, a heavy pressure in my chest, like saying no would somehow make me a bad daughter. But that night, there was no guilt. There was only clarity. Cold, sharp clarity. The kind you feel when you finally realize a business deal has become a bad investment. In finance, every account has a limit. Every credit line eventually runs out. And as I stared at my phone, I realized something important. My patience with my family had a limit too, and that balance was almost gone. I didn't call my mother to hear her fake crying. I didn't text back to ask why a five-star resort couldn't process a simple payment. I already knew the answers. Their credit cards were probably maxed out, their bank accounts probably empty, and they expected me to fix it. Again, I opened the Venmo request. My thumb hovered over the screen for a moment. Then I typed a single word. No, no explanation, no apology, no emotional speech, just one word. Then I pressed decline. After that, I opened my phone settings and turned on Do Not Disturb. The phone stopped vibrating immediately. The silence in the apartment returned. I plugged the phone into the charger and watched the screen slowly go dark. Then I walked over to the window and looked out at the Boston skyline. For the first time in years, I wasn't reacting emotionally. I was thinking logically. This wasn't a family problem anymore. It was a balance sheet, and I had finally decided to stop funding the circus. I went back to my desk and opened my laptop. My spreadsheets were still on the screen. Numbers, budgets. Investment projections. Cold, honest data. Numbers don't lie. People do. Inside my quiet apartment, the light from my laptop filled the room. And sitting there in the silence, I felt something strange. Not anger, not sadness, something calmer than that. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally closing an account that should have been shut years ago. For 5 years, I hadn't just been a daughter. I had been the primary financial supporter of my parents' lifestyle. And when I closed my eyes, I could almost see the paper trail of everything I had given them. 3 years ago, my father called me in a panic. He needed $6,000 for emergency surgery. But later, I discovered something interesting. He actually had an emergency fund. He had just spent it buying a new truck he couldn't afford. Then there was my mother. Her $12,000 credit card debt that appeared after a shopping spree with women from her country club. Apparently, keeping up appearances was more important than paying bills. And of course, there was Destiny, my younger sister, the star of the Santorini wedding. 2 summers ago, I paid for what she called a fashion internship in Milan. I imagined long days working with designers, learning about the industry, building a career. Later, I discovered the truth. It wasn't an internship. It was a 20-day shopping vacation. She spent nearly $5,000 of my money buying outfits just to take photos in front of European cathedrals for her social media. 10,000 followers, most of whom probably didn't even know her last name. My family had slowly turned my bank account into a shared resource, and my personal boundaries into a problem. Looking back now, I recognize it for what it really was: a toxic system. In families like that, the responsible child eventually stops being seen as a person. Instead, they become a tool. My parents didn't admire my discipline. They didn't respect the long hours I worked building my career. They just saw an unlimited credit line with a heartbeat. They used to call me the strong one. But over time, I realized what that really meant. It meant I was the one they believed they could drain forever without hearing a complaint. I looked down at my hands resting on the keyboard, hands that had spent thousands of hours working late nights, missing holidays, skipping vacations, all to build financial security. Not just for myself, but for them too, and suddenly I understood something clearly. They hadn't seen my success as something to celebrate, they had seen it as something to harvest. My compassion had become a resource they had been overdrawing for years, and tonight, I had finally closed the account. But I didn't realize yet that the real disaster in Greece was only just beginning. Because a few hours later, at 3:17 in the morning, my phone would start screaming again. And when I finally looked at the screen, I would realize that the wedding in Santorini hadn't just gone wrong. It had turned into a criminal investigation. And somehow, my name was already in the middle of it.